These are some dark days when it comes to being a Sox fan. Let's discuss how we got here, how we can get through it together, and if there's any hope with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at southsideshowdown.com. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So you and I both know times are tough these days for your Chicago White Sox. This might be the darkest time in franchise history, even darker than the late 60s when the team was awful and possibly moving to Milwaukee. The team is as bad as it was then, and there's at least speculation that a move to Nashville could be in the cards someday. Who knows if the team will ever relocate, or maybe a new owner might buy the team from Jerry Reinsdorf's heirs once he leaves this world and build a new stadium on his or her own dime. What we do know is this organization is downright awful. Apathy and disgust is the best way to describe what most of the fan base thinks about the Sox. And to talk about how the Sox got to this point and how to get through this and maybe some better days ahead is Herb Lawrence, the White Sox community leader at CHGO and formerly of 670 The Score and former host of this very podcast. And Herb, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, Todd. Thank you for having me on. It's always good to be on Locked On White Sox.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. You and Tanny did a great job. I remember listening to you guys you guys were on during the pandemic era, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then Nick took over and all that. So first, I'm going to steal a question from out of your book, as I really loved that episode you did with Missy Carroll of Sports Mockery and Southside Behavior, and asked her about her background as a fan. So for those on the show that may have forgotten, or for those that may not have heard, what is your background as a Sox fan?
Well, I grew up with parents that didn't really like baseball or didn't really take me to baseball games. So my first baseball game was a Houston Astros Cubs game when my aunt took me to that game. And so that was around 88. Cubs are kind of getting good. 89, they won the division, of course. And so in 90, when I became like 11, 12 years old, I had a choice of, hey, should I go to the south side or should I go to the north side? I was a suburban kid from Wheaton, so I really didn't have any allegiance. Nobody in my fan group or my friends had really any allegiance to any team. If any, it would be the Cubs. I just saw the White Sox uniforms in 90. They debuted, they did a soft launch of the uniforms they currently have at the end of 90. And I was like, yes, I want that. I like that type of style, the old English SOX. And so I became a fan in 1990. Late in that season, saw Frank Thomas's first couple of bats as a Chicago White Sox, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I remember that was when they were closing out Old Comiskey Park, where they were wearing the old Englishes. I actually didn't mind the late 80s, but I wasn't a fan of the C, even though now I'm like, man, I wish I had a C hat like that with the curled logo there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Why should the San Diego Padres be a Sox fans backup team? I got to ask that too.
Well, for me, I lived out there, so that's why it was the easy choice for me to go there as the backup team. But they have similar, underachieving backgrounds for the San Diego Padres. They're just the opposite of the White Sox, a very aggressive general manager that's trying to do whatever he wants to do to try to field a competitive team. AJ Preller has been trying to do this for a while now and to middling results. Last year, they had over 100 run differential, and they didn't make the playoffs. They were kind of good, but they were I think an 81 team last year. Same thing this year. They're in the playoffs technically, but they're still 500 or just a game below 500. And it's a fun team usually when they do play well, but that is few and far between. And so White Sox fans would be used to it, but at least you wouldn't blame the front office for all the problems, or the owner, which they just had their primary owner die in this offseason, and Peter Seidler, and I think his group has taken over and keep on continuing to spin, even though they did trade away Juan Soto this offseason, which happily got us Drew Thorpe, who, besides yesterday's thing, was a good prospect, and I think a guy that you should be looking forward to. So I think if you want to become a fan of some other team in the National League, Padres are my choice, but you don't have to go any further than 90 miles or 90 minutes up north to the Brewers. I've gone to a game up there. Mercy. I love that stadium. And also, that's a fun, young team that it just hits and pitches very well. I would think if you're kind of a White Sox fan that doesn't want to give all their money to Jaron Reinsdorf or any of it, Miller Park / American Family Field's a great place to go.
Yeah, that's actually a preview of we're gonna get in the second segment is of where there's hope and all that. But yeah, having a backup team is key to getting through the season. And the Brewers are mine, but it's because I do live in Milwaukee, and also because I got a paycheck from them for 11 seasons. I worked at the scoreboard for the Brewers, so I watched a lot of terrible baseball. So my first year was actually 2003 in the scoreboard, where they lost 90 games and they were coming off a 100-loss season. So that, like, when people ask, how can I do this year by myself? Trust me, I've seen actually just as worse or just as bad. All right, let's dive into first how we got here. I know Sox fans have their perspective on how the team declined, but what was the biggest factor that led to this franchise decaying so quickly, in your opinion?
Just taking out the obvious answer of Jerry Reinsdorf as the overarching problem with this team, I think it is the terrible general managing of Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams during their time. Now, I think Jerry Reinsdorf created this dynamic where Rick has to ask Kenny for permission to do things, and Kenny has to ask permission from Jerry to do things. So I think when they gave Rick Hahn the job as general manager after the 2012 season, they should have just said, you're the baseball decision maker. Kenny's kicked up to a higher position, more like a emeritus position where his counsel will be needed, but not the final word. Because I think that relationship created all divisiveness in the front office, the mistrust, and some of these bad moves. We just talked about it yesterday, where you're giving money, and then Jerry opened the checkbook to $75 million, and Rick and Kenny looked around the whole landscape of what the White Sox needed that time and said, you, Andrew Benintendi, you're our guy. 5 years, $75 million. Like, these decisions are just bad. Like, he was coming off a mid-year where he's hurt, and we're giving him all this money because he was younger, kind of in his prime. We've seen the results now that Andrew Benintendi's not that dude. Drafting of players like Nick Madrigal, Andrew Vaughn. These players are not major league top level 4th pick and 3rd pick overall type of draft picks. They're both undersized. They both have failed so far in their major league careers. But Andrew Vaughn might be coming, so he might be back to his regular thing. But I don't think he can sustain how hot he is right now throughout the rest of the season. So picking him 4th overall and Nick Madrigal or 3rd and 4th overall, these are the problems where the White Sox run into trouble. So they had a good team, but they didn't supplement the team when it was time to win, aka what the Cubs did in 2015, where they had a good team where all the prospects hit, and then they needed more pitching. So they went out and got John Lester. They went out and got John Lackey, and then they went out and got Jason Hayward to fill the spots they didn't have that made up their minor league system. When the White Sox had that, they went out and got Nomar Mazara. These are the different things. They're not spending money on real-time free agents. And so those are the big problems. I think the front office and their squabbles, and that's why they got fired together, kind of ruined this whole thing. And they didn't have a single focus on the baseball and how to get the baseball back to where it needs to go. And I don't know if Chris Getz has it within him to do better than those guys, but the fact that he is the sole baseball decision maker, and I'll put those in quotes because I know Jerry's the guy over him, so he's got baseball decision making in him, and I'm sure that Tony La Russa has Jerry's ear. So sole is just a title, But I hope that they allow him to be and do what he wants to do and fail on his own volition. If he sucks, but not because you're bickering and arguing over little dumb things like Kenny and Rick did.
All right, one take though that you had, especially when Chris Getz was hired, that I thought was outstanding was you pointed out that Jerry Reinsdorf was selfish. Yes. How he just didn't do much of a search. How much is that overlooked when the Sox community blames him for all the team's problems? Because they blame him for not spending money, but I think selfishness is a big key of why the White Sox are specifically in this issue right now.
It's a huge key. And the problem with Jerry Reinsdorf is the problem with anybody that's successful but does the wrong things to get there. Like if you do things to cheat or shortcuts and you happen to win, that's going to inform your life decisions going forward. He won a World Series with a flawed roster. He won a World Series with a 99th percentile year from most players on that team. Like no one really got, I mean, people got hurt. I mean, Dustin Hermanson got hurt, but then you get Shingo Takatsu, he gets hurt. Then you get the rookie Bobby Jenks, and he comes up and he pitches lights out. Neil Kotz and Cliff Polite pitched their best season of their careers. Frank Thomas hits 12 home runs and gets hurt in the middle of the year, and you still don't miss a beat. And you get the 4 complete games in the ALCS. Like he took that and said, you know what? I'm a good owner. I won a championship for Chicago. And he moved forward with that thought in his head. It's like, we're going to have Kenny as our guy. And we're going to just go on with the same type of plan I had that year because that brought me success that year. And he didn't change with the times. He still probably has the lowest amount of people in their analytics department. He's probably thinking about, hey, who could I get? Like that's why you bring back Tony La Russa. He wanted to make a mea culpa for the thing that he said was his biggest regret of firing him or allowing Hawk Harrelson firing him in '86. So he wanted to like, okay, while we have this good team and while Ricky Renteria just took us to the playoffs, I don't care who you have to bring up Rick Hahn. I don't care if you have AJ Hinch ready to go. I'm gonna make good on a mistake I made and bring this dinosaur in for this young, fun team and change the whole culture of the team. Like those things, those decisions where you're usurping your general manager, those are just to serve Jerry. They're not to serve the team. They're not to serve the fans. None of that stuff. Hiring Chris Getz without a search, that's to serve Jerry because Chris Getz probably said the words that he needed to hear to like feed his ego. Oh man, you're one of the greatest owners. Oh, these guys are just messing up your team. I can get this done quicker than usual. And he's like, oh, you know what? This guy's speaking the baseball I like. He's like, who do you compare him to? Casey Stengel or who was the guy? Connie Mack. Golly. Yeah, Branch Rickey. Oh my God.
And David Eckstein. David Eckstein was his favorite player.
Yeah, he was just enamored by him talking and didn't do a thorough search. If they would have went out and looked at everybody and interviewed all the candidates and the final decision was to hire Chris Getz, I would have been skeptical, but at least you would have at least spoke to everybody. And at most, you would have had some data mining and had what other teams around the league do for their teams to make them better. That would have been a little bit better thing than just hiring Chris Getz like 2 weeks after you fire Chris or Hahn and Williams. So he is all about selfishness. And the fact that he doesn't play golf or he doesn't have another hobby is the reason why he's keeping this team is the height of selfishness. This team sucks. The organization sucks. It's one of the worst organizations in sports. As we saw with the Athletic article where they're interviewing players, no one wants to come here. It's the second worst team. And the only worst team is a team that's leaving that stadium that is decrepit and leaving town for Sacramento and then going to Vegas in the A's. So you're better than them. And that's it. In a world-class city like Chicago with the best uniforms in baseball, with opportunity to just own this city, he doesn't because he wants to do things his way instead of the correct way.
All right, well, let's discuss how we're going to get through this season with one of the White Sox community leaders next on Locked On White Sox. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple clicks at supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free TradeMaster program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the TradeMaster program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. And things are not going well for the White Sox this season, but that doesn't mean you still can't make some memories around Sox baseball by taking in a game. Guaranteed Rate Field still has great food. The Sox community is still one of the best. And if you have kids, they're still going to love taking in a game live. Former Lockdown White Sox host Nick Morawski was on the show a couple weeks back, talked about how his kids loved every moment of going to a game this year. So if you want to save some cash on seats, and maybe not give Jerry Reinsdorf directly your money, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And the Dodgers are going to be in town soon, so why not see a star-studded team and use the Game Time app where they have zone deals? Save even more when you choose a section like Game Time, choose the seats. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, and streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox start a 3-game home series against the Houston Astros tonight. First pitch is at 7:40 p.m. Central. Or 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making the show one of your first listens. Lots of great White Sox podcasts out there like CHGO. And I have current co-host Herb Lawrence on the show today. And Herb, where can we get your great content and Sean Anderson's and Vinny Duber's?
Well, we're on CHGO _ White Sox if you're following on Twitter, and we do shows mostly on post game. So if there's a White Sox game, which there isn't one tonight, after the game, we'll just open up the mics and just talk about what happened during the game and any exciting news during the day. Because at this point of the year, we know the Sox season's over, so we're not necessarily focusing on the game that happened unless there's something specific in that game that we need to discuss. But mostly post games and on off days, it's usually a 3:00 show. It's on YouTube, available for you guys anytime you want.
Yep. And make sure then you smash that like button for those guys. And Herb, what is it like being a community leader and talking about the White Sox basically every day during this terrible season?
It's kind of, that's not hard. It's easy because I think that most people understand what's going on with the White Sox. And I'm just trying to have fun with the job that I have and watching the team. I watch every game no matter what, even though I say, I'm going to take a break on Fridays and Saturdays because those are usually days that we do not work at CHGO. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to watch. And then I find myself in front of the TV because I'm a White Sox fan, enjoying a game, even though they're so frustrating. So I tried to have that atmosphere either on my Twitter, or if I see somebody out in public, they want to talk about the White Sox, I'm like, hey, man, if you want to go to a game and you want to enjoy yourself and you just read the Game Time thing, like, definitely don't give Jerry your money. Go to Game Time, do those things, and you can have a good time, not deprive yourself of a fun event in Chicago, which is a great city, just because you're mad at the owner. And so that's what I think community is like, it's still enjoying something that is decidedly terrible, but you're not going to be punishing yourself by not enjoying those things at the ballpark, because that's the one thing I agree with the White Sox. It is better at the ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to a game live in a few years. I got to get down there at some point because none of that. I mean, I know Bernstein and Holmes always say that's the best time to go because there's no lines for the bathroom, there's no lines for the concessions. And what are some other reasons why it would still be worth it to even go to a game at the ballpark or even turn this team on? As
I mean, always, if you got a Garrett Crochet pitching event, that's always a appointment television. And I know the average is not looking good so far, and he's been only playing a couple games this year. But Luis Robert Jr. is a superstar. He gets hurt often, but he's come back, and I think he's hit 7 home runs on the year. And the Rockets, every time he does hit them out of the ballpark. So those two individuals, I think, are worth you just sitting down and watching a White Sox game if Garrett is pitching and when Luis Robert bats third in the lineup. Because, yeah, he might look bad and look horrible on a slider that's outside the zone. But when he gets a fastball in the zone or a hanging slider, it's going really deep. And he can play defense with the best of them out there in center field. So those two specifically, I would say that's why you should watch White Sox baseball. Otherwise, it's really rough. I mean, Tommy Pham is going to be here and it's going to be gone. Same thing with Julks. Same thing with Paul DeJong, who leads the team in home runs. Otherwise, Fetty's going to be gone too, but he's pitching pretty decently himself. So it's kind of like, I know White Sox fans don't like this. It's watching when the rebuilding was happening back in the 16, 17, 18. That's what you got to be looking forward to, like looking in the minors, checking out Future Sox and everybody who covers the White Sox minor league system. That's kind of like you got to put your heart back into believing the White Sox front office, even though it's a different front office, that they can get the job done and that the young players that they have down in the system are going to be eventually coming up here. And you say, hey, I went through that worst season in baseball history in 2024, and now in 2028, the White Sox are second place in the AL Central. I won't even give them the first place thing because I can't believe it until it happens. They've only won one AL Central crown since 2008, so it's like for me to say they're going to win another one, it's going to be really hard because I can't see it. It's far away.
Yeah, and only 2 playoff games that they won too. And does anyone attend or watch if Getz trades Luis Robert Jr. or Garrett Crochet at the deadline?
I think people are going to be angry, visibly angry, because I guarantee you're not going to get close to the value you're going to need to get back from Luis Robert Jr. 3.5 years by itself should give you a top 100 prospect. The player should give you a top 100 prospect. Then the team-friendly contract with cost control of only $20 million in the last 2 years in his prime should get you a top 100 prospect. And yes, he has injury history, but damn it, it's Luis Robert Jr. If you have him in your club, you can maybe have him do different things in the White Sox, because it seems to be a White Sox thing, not necessarily a Luis Robert thing, because he gets hurt, Yohan gets hurt, Eloy gets hurt, and it's a continuous thing, and it's happened all throughout their careers. So maybe it's a White Sox thing. You get him on your team, then you're cooking with gas. So I don't know why Chris Getz would trade him unless he got a deal where it is unimpeachable that he won the trade, that what he got back will be much better than the 3.5 years he would move forward with Luis Robert Jr. That's the trade I would have to see that, hey, it's been real, Luis, but we got this Baltimore player, this Baltimore player, this Baltimore player. They're all major league ready, and we're going for business. That probably won't happen. And the same thing with Garrett Crochet. You always look for a top of the rotation pitcher. You have one with 2.5 years left on his contract at another cheap, pretty much not cost control because of arbitration, but he's 24. So you found something and you've cultivated him. You drafted him and you found money. So why wouldn't you just keep that until somebody blows your socks off with a deal that is undeniable? I know people like, oh, injury history with him too. I think you can't go into the trade deadline thinking about his injury history. If you're the White Sox, you got to be not shopping him or Luis Robert, and you got to have somebody come to you and say, this is the deal. And that deal, everybody, including yourselves, had to say, that is a steal. We have to take it. We'll be idiots not to take it. Anything short of that, you shouldn't be doing that. Yes, and fans should abandon the White Sox if they trade either one of those players and don't get an absolute haul back.
All right, so in the next segment, it is time to discuss if there are possible better days ahead with Herb next on Locked On White Sox. Now, if playing daily more or less is your thing, let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun, exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports or players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to $100, 100 times your cash. You can win up to 100 times your money with a baseball-only lineups on Prize Picks. If you submit a winning lineup featuring 4 demon squares, you'll cash in big time on the biggest moments of baseball's early season. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. As I've mentioned in the past, I have a buddy who lives behind the Cheddar Curtain. He uses Prize Picks to get in his entries in toward his hopes of getting a payout. Plus, what he likes and what I think is cool about Prize Picks, it's so easy to play. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And the White Sox start a 3-game home series against the Houston Astros tonight. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I have Herb Lawrence with me from CHGO and formerly of 670 The Score and former host and co-host of Locked On White Sox a couple years back. Him and Tanny did a great, Chris Tannehill did a great job of hosting. And then Sean Anderson, I believe, took over for a little bit. And then Nick. And now me, I'm the one talking during the absolute worst season in Sox history. But Herb, is there hope for the White Sox to get back to being competitive? And if so, where does it come from?
The hope lies in currently the White Sox have a pretty good pitching staff down in Birmingham specifically. And so they have prospects who are ready to go. And we saw a little preview on Sunday's game with Drew Thorpe. I think the game plan was bad, so he had a bad chance of surviving that. But I think the kid is really good. He's there. He was got in the Dylan Cease trade along with Jairo Iriarte, who's down in the minor leagues, doing ish good, but he's striking out a lot of players, even though he can't find his command or control down there. And if he does, watch out. Of course, they just promoted Noah Schultz, who's just pitching on Saturdays down there, keeping his throwing days down because he's just 18, 19 years old. Big, tall lefty from Oswego, getting the job done out there. So that's very promising. They have a lot of those pitchers. Mason Adams, same thing down there. The other thing, they have 2 top quality, I believe, going to turn into decent major league players. I think Colson Montgomery is going to turn into a really good Major League Baseball player. He's 21 years old, 21 or 22 down in Charlotte right now, hitting the ball hard, hit a home run yesterday. And of course, switch hitting catcher Edgar Caro, who's down in Birmingham. So there's players, there's pieces. And then the fact the White Sox have at least 10 players that they want to trade before the trade deadline, which I think is about 45 days away from today, they're going to get some players back from that. Now, will they get quality players? Probably not. I think Eric Fetty will fetch you the best players coming back because of his 1.5 control. And he's been pitching like a nice mid-tier starter, which is very valuable in the major leagues. And so you're going to get something back for Eric Fetty. If they do trade the 2 players we were talking about earlier in Garrett Crochet or Luis Robert Jr., they're going to get a boatload. Most definitely. And most definitely, it's probably going to be somebody or some people who are major league ready. And all the rest of the players, like we did last year when you traded Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez, you get Kai Busch and Edgar Caro back. Edgar Caro is going to be a star, I believe. Kai Busch is doing very well down in the minor leagues right now as a lefty starter. You traded Jake Berger last year. You got back Jake Eder. Now, last year, Jake Berger was still going off down in Miami. This year, he's cooled off a little bit. And while you look at the ERA for Eder down in AA, you're like, oh, that's 4+. No, but his FIP is like in the mid 3s or low 3s, I think. And so he's pitching really well as of late, coming off of Tommy John surgery a couple years ago. So there's players that they've turned into from players that weren't going to have on the team. Like Kendall Graveman went to Houston last year. You get Corey Lee back. Now, is he going to be a starter in the major leagues for the rest of his career? Probably not. But as a backup, he is a perfectly suited backup because his pop time is great. He can learn framing in his major league career. He's only a rookie. Yes, he's a little longer in the tooth. I think he's 26 years old. But I think that you got a actual body that's playing Major League Baseball, doing decently well in his rookie year for the White Sox. And you got him for Kendall Graveman, who was a reliever that you weren't going to keep on your team because he was making $8 million. So, yeah, I think this year is even more promising than what last year is. And so they should have some players on the squad in 2025 that are at least looking forward to better days instead of all these older players like Tommy Pham and Mike Clevenger's on the team, Flexens and Sorokas. Like, you should have some young players like they can at least grow into being better instead of old veterans who are has-beens or never were that you're looking just to trade away and get better pieces for.
Well, and also if you have a competitive starting rotation that's young and controllable, look at how the Brewers have stayed competitive all these years, and now they're actually doing the flip. They got really good hitters, and they've been kind of piecemealing a rotation together. So, what I dream of is a day where the Sox are both like the Brewers and the Guardians on one end, where they can develop pitching, and then on the other end, you're drafting really good position players like the Baltimore Orioles. That's a dream, Herb. It's a dream. And speaking of the guy that would have to get us that dream, he would at least be involved in the drafting, is Chris Getz. And can he prove that he can actually do this job, or at least what does he need to prove to do this job? Because I know you were given some thoughts on X, formerly Twitter, yesterday about him not being prepared to do this job.
I don't know if it's not prepared, but he's never done it. So it's like going into your first trade deadline and all the people that he has to trade. I don't know if a regular guy like last year, Rick Hahn, he had a bunch of people to trade. And he eventually traded all those players that he needed to trade, except for Mike Clevenger, who no one wanted. And because of different reasons of the off-the-field stuff and the money owed to him for opting out, no one wanted him. But mostly, Kenny and Rick cleared out house what they need to clear out. And so for Chris Getz, who hasn't made a trade. I mean, they made in-season trades with Robbie Grossman going some other place, but they haven't really made their mark of, hey, this is where we're going to start on trades. And none of the other teams are ready to trade, as you saw with the Bob Nightingale article, where most people and most general managers are focused on the draft that happens, I think, right in the All-Star break, right in the middle of this. So they're just getting their ducks in a row for that. And then they'll turn their focus to trading their players away after that draft happens. So Chris has to get all these conversations going with all these general managers before then to see what type of deals are out there for the players that the White Sox currently have. And then set up parameters of, okay, this is what the Mets are looking for, which they won't be in. Here's what the Phillies are looking for. This is what the Yankees are looking for. And getting those ducks in a row, it takes a long time to get your rhythm about yourself. Now, some of the trades he's made in his short, brief career, I'm fine with the 5-for-1 with Aaron Bummer going to Atlanta, and you get the 5 pitchers back, or the 5 players back, including Nicky Lopez and Riley Gowans and Michael Soroka. Fine. It was an all right trade. You get good players. The Dylan Cease trade, it looks like it's already paying dividends with Drew Thorpe already up here. Jairo Iriarte, Samuel Zavala is, I think, our 5th prospect in our system already. He's a 19-year-old kid down in Single A, kind of struggling himself, but you get actual fruits from the trade that you've already made. So I am confident that he will get the job done where he'll get some players back, but 10 plus trades, I don't know if he can do it unless he's packaging a couple of these people in the same trade to get back more return. So I'm just skeptical until it actually happens to see if he can get most of the players that he needs to trade or that are tradable off this team and get all the people back. So I'm just call me skeptical that he will be able to get the job done because of his youth, because of the people that are out there trying to probably take advantage of a person that's never done this before.
Yeah, no, you're right to be skeptical, especially like, remember the Braves were mentioning that he was asking for the moon and the sun and the stars, so that's the other thing. Is he going to be setting it to a higher price? And I know James Fegan of Sox Machine mentioned, I think he was on with Bernstein and Holmes a couple weeks back, they're looking for high-end positional players. And yes, they need positional players, but now the new thing is nobody's giving up position players. It's amazing how the pendulum swings. Like about 10 years ago, nobody was giving up pitching. And now it's nobody's giving up, high-end positional prospects. So that's why they were settling for guys with maybe high ceilings like Thorpe and Iriarte, but maybe low floors. Does that scare you that that's maybe what he might do? He might be like, fine, I'll take a Dominic Fletcher, who's, I know can be at least a productive player, maybe, but he's got a high, ceiling, which makes it to the majors, but maybe not a high floor. And that's what I think this team needs. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there'll be some settling because he knows that you probably can't have Tommy Pham on your team for the rest of the year. Like that doesn't do anybody any good. Like doesn't do Tommy any good or the White Sox any good to have him on the team after August. So at the end of the day, these teams know that Chris has the desire to move these players. And if he doesn't move them, there'll be backlash towards him. So he's like, I'll get whatever I can get on this trade. The Dominic Fletcher trade was good at the time, but now how they've actually processed Dominic Fletcher and how they've used him, it's a really dumb trade. Like you gave him like 3 weeks to be your starting right fielder and said, okay, you're not our guy. Bye. Get off my team immediately and go to AAA while you traded away a 21, 22-year-old Christian Mania. Like it didn't make sense now. At the time, I was like, this is your starting right fielder. You should give him every chance to fail, him or Zach DeLoach. But no, that did not happen. So I hope he doesn't do that trade or those type of trades where you give somebody who, like you said, has a high ceiling a chance to play for a little bit. And then once they prove in that short span that they can't do it, that you move on. This is the season to do it. Just give them all the chance to be the guys that they're going to be. And if you see something, any glimpse of something, give a chance for them in 2025, because this next season is going to be slightly better than next season, but not that much better.
Yeah, so I got 3 more questions, and then I'll let you go there. Speaking of, giving up on a guy and then totally contradicting himself, Pedro Grifol, we got to get to him. I got you for a few minutes. I wanted to get your thoughts on him, but the reason it just sparked a thought was Lenine Sosa even said, why is he playing better? It's because they're not making him think out there. They're letting him play free. And then all of a sudden Pedro's like, yeah, I should do that. So is that just another example of this guy's got to be fired this season? Or is Jerry just going to say, you know what? I don't want to pay him to go away right now. I'll pay him to go away in the off season.
Yeah, I think that I'm a managers don't matter that much guy. I've always been that guy. Tony changed that, and Pedro is like solidifying that opinion that they matter a little bit, because I think that he's stunting growth. Like he was probably instrumental in the Dominic Fletcher demotion last year, very instrumental in the Oscar Colas demotion, where all offseason they're talking about, man, this Oscar Colas, he's doing this, that, and the other. He's our guy. And then you give him 3 weeks to fail and be bad and miss cutoff guys. And then you're like, okay, that's enough.
Suddenly they wanted him to play first base in spring training. Now, sorry to interrupt, but now suddenly he's back and he's great. He's great.
Yeah. Like this, it's an inconsistent message. And I'm sure none of the players respect him. Like coming in the door with no bona fides, no managerial experience. The only thing he had was, hey, I kind of helped Salvador Perez become the catcher that he was, but there's no evidence of that specifically, like where Salvador was lost before, and now Salvador is great because of Pedro Grifol. So, and then in the door, he lost 8 and 21 in his first games, and so players like, this guy, even though they know that they're more responsible for it, there was no like, hey, we're winning because of this guy, or we're losing because of this guy. It was just a nothing there. And then the same thing this year. Hey, I'm going to be on these players. We're going to play fast. We're going to make up an acronym. And they're not any of those things. Like he made up an acronym and said you're going to be kicking their ass by 7-10 every day. None of those things have happened. He's actively bad. His post games contradict themselves, as you just said, all the damn time. His decision making is just woeful. Like he took Corey Jokes out after he just hit a double in the 7th inning where the game is close, and Corey Jokes is in the 77th percentile of sprint speed in the league. to put him in for Duke Ellis, who is probably in the 98th percentile, but it's not that big of a difference where you got to take a better player out in Corey Jokes, who might get a chance to hit again because he was the leadoff guy that day, and for a guy who just run. And then he bunted the guy over. So it's like, you took him out just to bunt him over. Corey Jokes could have did that. Those type of things are why Pedro is just a bad manager. He's not thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead like a real good manager is. Like, I'm taking this guy out because he gives us a better chance in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings to do well than the guy I'm taking out. Those decisions, I think, even if they failed, people will be like, okay, Pedro, I get the process you're doing, even though the result wasn't favorable. Pedro does a lot of bad, flawed processes, and usually the results follow suit. So, yes, he has to go. And as we saw with the Astros, and I know the series this week is versus the Houston Astros, they were like, okay, this Jose Abreu thing, we've given it a year and a half. It's not working out. Jose, it's been real. Here's $30 million to get off our team because we see that this is not working out. So we're going to eat that money. It's a sunk cost anyway, and stop playing the game of Jose Abreu's an Astro. It didn't work out, and go away. That's what Jerry should do. He should be like, it didn't work out. It was a good, fair, honest chance to give Pedro Gafal a much needed and much deserved managerial spot. It didn't work out. Bye. Yeah. It's a year and a half of pay. I don't care. I know Jerry does care because it's his money. But if I was an owner, the last thing I would care about is actual money, because it's not, and especially a manager's money, it's in the grand scheme, it's negligible. It's pocket change.
Yeah, and part of that, though, is that loyalty to a fault. I mean, he's had no problem firing on the Bull side in season and all that, although it's taken him a little bit. But with the White Sox, I think the last manager he fired technically full, like in season, I know Ozzie left with 3 games left, I think was Gene Lamont, and then Terry Bevington replaced him. And I never thought that there could be a manager worse than Terry Bevington until Pedro Gafal. Never in my wildest dreams could I think that you could get somebody that bad. But whenever Pedro is fired, who do you want to see replace him?
Well, if it's Jerry, who do I want to see replace him?
Yeah,
I would go with Sergio Santos, who is doing wonders down there with the Birmingham Barons team. He's former White Sox closer. They traded away to Toronto, has come back. He had a great season, I think, last year under the Yankees organization. I think he won Manager of the Year, and they won a division there. Like, sometimes people just listen to people who have played the game a little bit more, and he has a game plan. You can see the Birmingham Barons doing well for themselves, and maybe it's just because of all the great pitching I talked about earlier today, but also they weren't that good last year. None of the organizations in the White Sox were that good last year. I think that for them and Jerry Reinsdorf, they're going to look right to Charlie Montoyo or Justin Jersley, who is the Triple-A manager. But I would skip over both of those guys and go to the person that is Sergio Santos and say, hey, man, go ahead and do your thing and be the building block from this rebuilding team, which you have very like next year, he'll probably have most of the players that he has this year on that team in Chicago if he is named the manager, and they'll be very accustomed to his managing style. And I think the White Sox will hit the ball rolling or hit the ground running because he's about development and that's what the White Sox are going to have next year, a year of development. And so you want somebody who's got the patience, the wherewithal, and the respect of the players because he's been in those battles that they're going into.
Yeah. And then finally, are you glad that Tyler Kolek is leaving Marquette? Because, 2-0 against U of I.
That was enough for that guy. Yeah. I looked at him when they played in like November. I was like, it's the best player in the court. And I don't know if Terrence Shannon was on that. Even if he was on the court that time, Tyler Kolek changes games when he's on the team. He's kind of reminds me of kind of like not Drew Holiday, more TJ McConnell-ish, but like a floor general. He knows what he can do. He moves. It's not like extra fast, but he moves quick. He can get to the hoop. He just is a player, and whoever drafts that guy is getting a winner. If he starts from the beginning or if he comes off the bench, he's getting a winner. The guy just knows how to play basketball, and there's very few basketball IQ players and also people who know their bodies to get to where they need to go, because I think that sometimes you just pick up height, weight, speed we can develop this guy. There's something to be said about this guy plays basketball. He's a hooper. And people would respect that, and he would get you buckets. He would get you assists. He would get you steals and leadership eventually. When he's like 5 years in the game, everyone's like, man, that Tyler Kullock, we need him on our team to go from here to the next level. I guarantee he's going to be a nice NBA player for his career. Because when I saw him, I was like, he's the best player on the court. And he might not be lighting up the scoreboard, but he's controlled this game throughout.
Yeah, see, I'm a Marquette grad. I know I respect you for being a U of I guy, but I had to give you a little bit of a hard time as, in his tenure, they beat the Illini twice, especially, what was it, 2 years ago when they had no business beating them and they somehow found a way. But
that's Shaka Smart. We tried to get him multiple times and he was like, no, I'm good.
He's not going to go to Big State University anymore. After that Texas thing, he's happy at Marquette. They pay him like a god there. So, basketball is all we got. We don't have football.
And that's a spot, right? He didn't grow up in the Milwaukee area?
He grew up in the Madison area, actually.
Okay.
Oregon, Wisconsin. So maybe we got to worry about if the Badger job ever came open.
No one wants to go there.
No.
Illinois dominates. He don't want to go over there. Illinois dominates Kohl Center. They should change the name.
Well, they also dominate Camp Randall. Well, they
not dominate
though at home.
A little rough. Yeah. But yes, we've won more games versus Wisconsin than we used to.
Oh, well,
in football.
Was it 2020? I thought the state was going to burn down, even though everybody was in their house after that.
Great victory.
Yeah, and hey, man, I'm still a 1989 U of I fan, deep in heart, man. That was actually my team because Marquette was terrible when I was growing up. Anyways, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. Free 24/7 sports streaming channel, program for you every day, bringing you the biggest sports stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Herb, thank you for joining me. Again, you can get all his content on CHGO, and I'll be back tomorrow with a Way Back Wednesday. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at Locked On White Sox. And where can they subscribe to CHGO? Herb?
CHGO_White Sox, or just go to my Twitter, Ecknerwall23. That is Lawrence spelled backwards with a 2-3 for Robin Ventura.
And follow or subscribe to the show, both shows on wherever you get your podcasts. And you can leave comments on YouTube or on X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or Locked On Sox, or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.